So because this is the Stage 1 overview and this video is going to be placed before all the rest of the Stage 1 content, if you are someone who is new to MIA and is going through the table of contents chronologically, then there might be a lot of content in this video that is very unfamiliar and doesn't really make any sense to you. But if that's the case, don't worry, because I'm going to be going into detail about everything I'm talking about in future videos. And the point of this video is really just to give you something to come back to every once in a while when you want a nice, clear bird's eye view of the whole stage so that you can help gauge where you are within it. So really, the goal with Stage 1 is to help you gain a foundation in listening to and understanding the language. So it's really focused on becoming able to understand your target language to a pretty decent level. And how you are going to go about this is, first of all, we're going to have a lot of theory to go through because this is the first stage, and so we have to kind of build up all our theoretical models and things from the ground up. So this is probably going to be the most theory-heavy stage of the entire MIA table of contents, but it's also going to have all the most important stuff because you're really going to want to understand how language acquisition works and how the techniques work. Now, getting onto the actual techniques, what are you actually going to do? Well, first of all, you're going to want to slowly work up to building up a pretty solid immersion environment. So what I mean by immersion environment is you want to spend as much time as possible with your actual target language. So actually reading things in your target language, listening to your target language, getting as much genuine input from your target language as possible. That's going to be the thing that contributes to your progress the most. And so you want to set up your kind of home environment and things like that so that it's easy to naturally spend a lot of time in the language. Now, you can't go from 0 to 100 overnight, but I'm going to be talking a lot about how you can incrementally up your immersion to the point where you're actually getting many solid hours with your language each day. And this is really the most important step in the entire MIA process. Now, in terms of actual study, the first thing you're going to want to do is obtain a spaced repetition system, which is a smart flashcard program that will help you keep track of all your learning and study efficiently. I recommend the program Anki. If you get Anki, it can be a little bit difficult to figure out how the program works at first, so you want to spend some time and at least figure out the basics. And then you're going to want to use Anki and learn the basics of pronunciation and the writing system of your language. So what I mean by this is just look up what sounds exist in your language, which of them don't exist in any of the languages you already know, and how to make those sounds, what they sound like, so on, and then the basics of the writing system. Now, how long this step will take is going to depend on what language you're learning, because some languages have much more difficult to learn writing systems than others. But it should take around 1 or 2 weeks for most languages. Now, if you're learning Japanese or Chinese, then you're going to go through what I call either lazy kanji or lazy hanzu, which is a kind of remixed version of James Heisig's book, Remembering the Kanji or Remembering the Hanzu. And this is going to help you quickly get a basic foundation in the Chinese characters so that you can recognize them pretty easily and you'll know the meaning of the most common characters. And this will allow you to learn to read words in the language relatively easily. So due to this step, Stage 1 is going to take significantly longer for those learning Japanese or Chinese than people learning other languages. So once you have the basics of the pronunciation and writing system down, then you're going to want to move on to actually learning the basic grammar and vocabulary of the language. And how you're going to want to do this is by obtaining a basic grammar book that has a lot of example sentences and minimal grammar explanation. And so ideally you want to get a pretty thick one that, again, has just lots of different examples and doesn't assume any knowledge. So it will really just start from 0 and slowly work you up until you have a good foundation of the basics. And how you're going to want to actually study these example sentences and consume the grammar guide is by making what I call bilingual sentence cards with your spaced repetition system. So these are cards where on the front of the flashcard you just have a sentence in the language, and then on the back you have whatever you need to help you understand that sentence. And then when you review, you're just going to be reading and understanding sentences. And I'll be talking in the future about why this technique is so powerful. And so you want to start by learning about 1,000 sentences out of whatever basic grammar guide you get. This should give you a pretty solid foundation in grammar and vocabulary. And after that, you want to start doing a technique called sentence mining, which is where you're actually taking real sentences straight out of your immersion from whatever you're watching or reading in your language and making bilingual sentence cards out of those and looking up whatever word you didn't know within the sentence. And this technique is also extremely powerful. If you want to, you can continue to learn sentences out of a kind of learner material prepackaged guide alongside sentence mining, but I highly recommend starting sentence mining after about 1,000 sentences. After you reach the point where you have around 2,000 to 2,500 sentences, and this is including the first 1,000 that you're using to gain a basic foundation, if you have been diligent about doing daily immersion in the language, then after around 6 months, you should find that you've reached a point where you can understand about 50% of the spoken language when you're listening to content that is on the easy side. And this is how you know that you have completed stage 1 of MIA. Now, I'm going to be talking more in the future about what exactly it means to understand something and what content on the easy side actually means and how you can accurately judge your own progress. But basically, that is going to be the main goal of stage 1, is to get to the point where you can understand around 50% of real spoken content in the language that is on the easy side, and also read everything that you understand spoken-wise, and maybe even be able to read a little bit more than you can understand when you're listening. And so, like I said a second ago, I think 6 months is pretty realistic for most people. It might take a little bit longer if you're learning a language like Japanese or Chinese, which is just kind of inherently more difficult, and especially if it's very different from your native language. And of course, it also depends on how much time you have to dedicate to the language each day. So there's probably going to be a lot of individual variation, but if you really put in a lot of time and you're diligent, I think 6 months is really realistic. Now, the last thing I'll say in this video is that from a psychology perspective, stage 1 is probably the most difficult stage in the entire process of learning a language, just because at the beginning, there's so much different stuff that you have to learn. You have to change your life in so many different ways, install so many new habits, and also you just don't have any results yet. So it feels like you're putting in so much time and effort, but you're not getting that much back yet. And this can make maintaining motivation very difficult. But if you just keep on persevering, what you should find is that about 2 or 3 months into the process, you'll have this kind of breakthrough when you'll realize that you're understanding much more of the language than you ever have before, and you're understanding more and more each day, and you're actually making quite rapid progress. And once you reach the point where you start to actually feel your own rapid progress, then maintaining motivation becomes much easier, because now you don't have to just trust that this stuff is going to work because I'm telling you that it's going to work. Now you have your own direct experience to prove it to you. And it's going to be very exciting to feel your own rapid growth like that. And so I just really want to encourage you to try to keep pushing through to get to the point where you have this breakthrough, even if it's a little bit tough in the first few months.